We're going to talk a little tonight about something. I brought some balm because it might sting a little bit, but it's going to be okay in the end.
It's all right.
Because when it was first given to me, I had to use some on myself. I got this message some years ago, and the Lord never told me when I was going to preach it. And he said the time was now. We're going to go to Matthew 26. I'm going to be reading from the 14th through the 16th verse. Matthew 26:14 says, Then one of the 12 called Judas Iscariot went unto the chief priests and said unto them, What will ye give me? And I will deliver him, meaning Jesus, unto you. And they covenanted, or counted out to him, 30 pieces of silver. And from that time, he sought opportunity to betray him.
Jesus.
What we're going to talk for a few minutes about tonight is the Judas agenda.
Have your way.
Now, most times what we basically know about Judas is that he was the one that pointed out Jesus, kissed Jesus. He was the one that betrayed him. And Judas has gotten a very bad rap. But we have to remember that Jesus, still being all man, was yet all God. He picked him out. He knew who he had among him. Judas in and of himself is not necessarily a bad man. He just got caught up in a bad situation. Judas was a tax collector, businessman. He had contacts in the city. But here's the problem that Judas had. And in reading, you'll find that Judas was really fascinated by Jesus because he actually believed that he was the Son of God. And while that was good, the other side of that was he believed that if he already came, then he must be ready to set up his kingdom right now. Amen. Even though he told him already, my time is not yet. The kingdom of God has not come to that degree yet. But let me explain about what an agenda is. An agenda is when you have an individualized set schedule of an individual things that should happen that give you and you only results that benefit you and you only. Now, a lot of times, if I said to you that you had a Judas, you would think maybe that person on your job that maybe wants your position that's always sabotaging you. Maybe that person that's always talking about you. Maybe that person is always getting on your nerves, and it always seems like they in the middle of setting you up and that kind of thing. You would think, a lot of times, you would be looking for who the Judas was elsewhere. But we don't want to talk about that, Judas, because see, you can get another job.
Come on.
You don't have to answer your phone when they call. You can even change churches. But what do you do with the Judas that you see in the mirror?
Come on, brother. Yeah.
Now let me explain this. Judas, as wise as he was as a businessman, he was very selfish. That's why he liked to hang on to the money. He was a manipulator. You ask yourself, how often have you manipulated the situation so that you would be the one to come out on top?
Amen.
Judas also, what he did in secret.
Amen.
And this is what I want to get to tonight. If you got to do it in secret, it can't be God. If you got to whisper and can't tell nobody, it can't be God. Now, there's one thing if God say, this is what I'm going to do, but keep quiet about it. But it's another thing when you manipulate, when you have your own set agenda about how you want to see the situation come out. And the only one that's really going to benefit is you in the end. And you do all you can to set that thing up. Because that's what the Judas agenda is. It's a setup. You do all you can to set it up. And in the end, everybody loses and you're the only one that wins. But nobody knew it was you, so everybody wondering how it happened. But you praying that that person that you told in secret don't tell nobody, so they'll keep your secret. Because here's what you need to know. To have a secret, somebody got to keep it. You got to tell somebody, because you don't ever do nothing by yourself. Even if you end up somewhere you got no business, somebody there with you. Somebody saw you that you didn't even know saw you. And then maybe you hooked up with your buddy, but you don't know your buddy had a change of heart. Now you're worried if they're going to tell your secret. Then you want to come to church and call it God. You want to tell somebody, God doesn't bless. God didn't bless you. You set that thing up. You manipulated the situation. That spirit of Judas started talking to you. Because if you read the word, when Jesus spoke to him and said, whatever you do, go do it quickly. It says, and the devil entered him. See, it wasn't him by himself. By himself, he wasn't a bad man. But he was susceptible. Because the enemy knew who to use. Isn't it a shame if when the enemy looking for somebody to use is you? When it really should be God looking for you? But God can't use you because the devil's able to use you? And you think you're the one that's about to win? But look a little further. Now Judas already knew that the chief priest already said, we're not going to take him during Passover. Because the people will tear us apart. We can't do that. Here was his plan. Judas figured, if I do this for these 30 pieces of silver, then they're indebted to me. They have to go get him. If they go get him, there'll be a ruckus. Then the people will have an uproar. And then Jesus will have no choice but to do what I figured he came here to do. According to my thoughts and my agenda, he will have to now set up his kingdom, and we will once again be our own people. We won't be under anybody's bondage. But you can't get out of bondage your way. You can't get out of bondage like you think you want to. God's already got a plan. He don't need your agenda. Here's the funny part about it. He had one before you was even born because he knew what you was going to get yourself into. Now somebody thinks that Judas was just a bad man and he just really, but I'm telling you, if you read in the 27th chapter, he threw the silver down and said, wait a minute. And it says, and when he saw he was apprehended. He said, wait a minute, that wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't on my list of things to do. No. He was supposed to cause an uprising. He blew my plan. Let me tell you something. Tonight, God's here to blow your plan. You thought you were going to finish that thing out, but God's getting ready to get you stuck. You getting ready to throw them pieces of silver you sold yourself over down and say, wait a minute, this ain't working like I do. How many of us have compromised our values to get what we want? Let me talk to the women for a moment. Maybe you can identify, because the men trying to be cool. But ladies, how many times have you smiled to get that discount?
Yes, God.
You knew right after that he was going to ask you for your phone number and you had no intention of giving it to him. But you won, but he didn't. How selfish is that? Why couldn't you call on the favor of God and still get a bigger and a better discount? Let me tell you why. Because Judas is known as the betrayer. Here's what you're going to have to analyze. To betray somebody means to break a commitment of trust. It's one thing to believe God, it's another thing to trust God. Believing God says, I know that he can do it. Trusting him says, I know he will do it. When we get impatient, which is what Judas did, and God's not moving quick enough for us, when we want him to do what we want him to do, because suddenly we made him and not the other way around. We call him the servant and we want to run the show. Didn't I tell you I needed that bill paid at 3 o'clock? Well, all right, I'm going to call up my sugar daddy then. I'm going to call my mama then. Fine, you don't want to come through, Father? Then I'm going to do something else. And then come in church on Sunday.